deputy were waiting outside the jury room to collect the bags and store them. It was 8:20 Tuesday morning. "How do the bags get from here to the hotel?" "We'll take them over later," Willis said, "but we have to inspect them first." No one's inspecting these bags."
"Judge's orders,"
said Lou Dell. "I don't care what the judge has ordered. No one is inspecting my bags." Nicholas placed them in a corner and walked to the coffee pot. By 8:45, all 12 jurors were present, and the room was full of baggage that Nicholas had rescued and stored. He'd done a fine job of making the jury feel really angry about the question of their baggage. At 9, Lou Dell knocked on the door.
"It's time to go. The judge is ready for you."
"Tell the judge we're not coming out," said Nicholas. The courtroom was full on Tuesday morning, so many people witnessed Lou Dell whispering to the judge. He wondered what to do. His jury was on strike. The judge addressed the court. "Gentlemen, there is a small problem with the jury. I need to speak to them." When the judge knocked on the jury door, Nicholas opened it. "What's the problem?" asked the judge. "We don't think it fair that the deputies search our bags." "Why not? It's routine in all sequestration cases." "These are our personal possessions. We're not terrorists or drug smugglers. We're not coming out until you promise our bags will be left alone." "Fine," replied the judge. "The bags will not be searched. But if I find out that a juror possesses any item which is on the list I gave you yesterday, then that juror could be sent to jail. Do you understand?" Easter looked round the room at the other jurors. "That's fine, Judge," he said. "But there's one other problem. According to your rules here, we're allowed one personal visit per week. We think we should get more." The judge didn't want to have a discussion about it. "Can we agree on 2? It's only a couple of weeks," he asked. 2 with a possible third," said Nicholas. "That's fine. Does that suit everybody?" "Thank you, Your Honor," Herman said loudly. The jury were ready to enter the courtroom. News of the break-in to Nicholas's apartment affected the Pinex share price. On the Tuesday morning, it started to fall. Then rumors started that the jury had refused to leave the jury room because the testimony offered by the plaintiff was so boring. The share price rose again. The woman juror that Fitch wanted to influence most was Ricky Coleman. She was a pretty 30-year-old mother of 2. She worked as an administrator in a local hospital, and her husband was a private pilot. Neither of the Colemans smoked, and there was no evidence that they drank. Because of her lifestyle and her job in a hospital, Fitch was afraid of Ricky Coleman as a juror. Fitch had managed to get hold of medical records for 7 out of the 12 jurors, including those of Ricky Coleman. After some investigation, he discovered that while Ricky had been at a small Bible college in Montgomery, Alabama, she'd become pregnant, but had decided not to have the baby. The operation was carried out in a small private women's hospital a week after her 20th birthday. The father wasn't named. Ricky had met her husband a year after she finished college. Fitch was willing to bet a lot of money that he didn't know about Ricky's pregnancy. The motel was called the Siesta Motel, and it was 50 kilometers along the coast. The trip was made by bus. The jurors felt tired and lonely. Only Nicholas was delighted with sequestration, but he managed to look depressed. The bus was followed by Fitch's boys and 2 detectives working for Roar. No one expected the motel address to remain a secret. The jurors were on the first floor of one wing of the motel. Lou Dell and Willis had rooms by the door leading to the main building. Another deputy, Chuck, had a room at the other end of the hallway. The rooms had been assigned by Judge Harkin himself. The motel TVs only showed hotel movies. No news or other programs during sequestration. The telephones had been removed. A room at the end of the hall had been made into a sitting room for the jurors. It was quickly given the name of the party room. No one could leave the wing without authorization. The following morning over breakfast, the complaints started. "I don't understand why we can't have telephones," Nicholas said. "Why can't we have a cold beer?" asked Jerry. "I have a cold beer every night when I'm at home, maybe two." The complaining increased until the jurors were ready to rebel. "We'd better get things sorted out now," said Nicholas seriously. "We're going to be here for 2 weeks, maybe 3. I say we talk to Judge Harkin." Judge Harkin was in his chambers with the lawyers when Gloria Lane entered.
"We have another problem with the jury. They're at the motel, and they're not coming until they can talk to you."
The judge gave a false smile. "Let's go and see them." Conrad took the first call at 8:02. She didn't want to talk to Fitch. She just wanted to leave a message that the jury were upset and not leaving the motel until the judge had seen them. At 8:09, she called again and gave Conrad the information that Easter would be wearing a dark shirt over a brown T-shirt and red socks. At 8:12, she called again and asked to speak to Fitch.
"Good morning, Fitch," she said.
"Good morning, Marlene."
"Do you know the St. Regis Hotel in New Orleans?" "It's on Canal Street. There's an open-air bar on the roof. Meet me there at 7 tonight."
"Fine."
"And come alone. I'll watch you enter the hotel, and if you bring friends, the meeting's off. And if you attempt to trail me, I'll disappear."
Judge Harkin, Cable, and Rohr were met at the front desk of the motel by Lou Dell, who was scared. She led them to the party room. After a few uncertain hellos, the judge said, "I'm a little disturbed by this." Nicholas Easter replied, "We're not in the mood to take any criticism." He'd written down a list of their complaints. The judge had to agree. Beer would be no problem. Newspapers would be allowed after they'd been checked. Phone calls were possible. Television was allowed, if they promised not to watch the local news. The judge asked for a no-strike guarantee in the future, but Easter wouldn't promise anything. On the news of a second strike, Pinex shares moved down 2 points, but later recovered. The St. Regis Hotel was watched by Fitch's people from the afternoon, but there was no sign of the girl. Just before 7, Fitch went up in the elevator to the roof and sat down. Several of his people were there at different tables. At 7:30, she appeared from nowhere. She was very pretty, and Fitch guessed her age to be between 28 and 32. The waiter asked if she wanted something to drink. He'd been bribed to remove anything she touched with her fingers. Glasses, plates, anything. He wouldn't get the chance. "Are you hungry?" Fitch asked.
"No, I'm in a hurry. If I stay, your goons can take more photos."
"So why are we here?"
"One meeting leads to another."
"And where do all the meetings lead us?"
"To a verdict."
"For a fee, I'm sure."
"Let's not talk about money now, okay?"
They talked briefly about some of the jurors. Fitch found out little about Marlee's real identity or her relationship with Nicholas Easter. As soon as Marlee had left, Fitch ordered his people to go after her. When she was nearly back home in Biloxi, Marlee told the police that she was being followed. 2 of Fitch's goons were arrested. Later that evening, Nicholas slipped out of the motel and met Marlee, who told him all about her trip to New Orleans. Wendell Rohr thought the court was tired of listening to scientists talk about lung cancer and smoking. So, on Thursday morning, he called Lawrence Krigler as his next witness. Lawrence Krigler had worked for Pinex. He'd left in the middle of a lawsuit with the company. He'd sued Pinex and they'd sued him, which had been settled out of court. While he was there, he did research on the possibility of growing an experimental tobacco leaf which contained much less nicotine. But the company wasn't interested. Nicotine was addictive. More nicotine meant more smokers, which meant more sales and more profits. It was an important moment in the trial. Everyone was listening carefully. Over lunch, the jury were silent. Did they really hear right? Did tobacco companies keep nicotine levels high so people became addicted? In the afternoon, Cable tried to introduce a lot of details into Crigler's testimony to confuse the jury. But during coffee, Nicholas explained to them what Cable was doing. By the end of Thursday, the price of Pinex shares was down. Crigler was quickly flown out of Biloxi by Rohr's security people. Pinex had paid him $300,000 out of court just to get rid of him. They wanted him to agree never to testify in trials. He refused, and so his life would always be in danger. Chapter 6. The Stillwater Bay Development. Millie Dupree's husband, Hoppy, owned a struggling real estate agency in Biloxi. He worked hard with the little business that came his way. Somehow, he took care of his family, his wife, Millie, and their 5 kids. Just before 6 on Thursday, a well-dressed young businessman entered the office and asked for Mr. Dupree. His business card showed him to be Todd Ringwald of KLX Property Group from Las Vegas, Nevada. His company liked to work with smaller companies, he said, and Hoppy had been highly recommended. He showed Hoppy a map. MGM Grand is coming here, but no one knows it yet. They're going to build the biggest casino on the coast, probably the middle of next year. We want this. On the map, he pointed to a large area of land northwest of the proposed casino. Then he showed Hoppy an artist's drawing of the land labeled Stillwater Bay. There were office buildings, big homes, smaller homes, a dock, parks, a shopping mall, even a proposed high school. The whole thing will cost $30 million. These are just the first drawings. I'll show you more if you can come to our office in Las Vegas. Hoppy's knees shook, and he took a deep breath. What kind of help were you thinking about from us? First, we need someone to arrange the purchase of the land. Then we'll need a real estate firm to advertise and sell the whole development. How much will the land cost? Asked Hoppy. It's expensive, $5 million. But the sellers don't really want to sell, so we have to move in quickly. That's why we need a local agent. Ringwald watched as Hoppy calculated his normal 6% fee on the land sale. $300,000. Hoppy's heart beat faster. And with the whole Stillwater Bay development, he could be a millionaire in 5 years. Ringwald said, I'm assuming your fee is 8%. That's what we normally pay. Of course, said Hoppy. His tongue was dry. From $300,000 to $400,000. Just like that. Who are the sellers? The property is in the 6th district, and the county supervisor is Jimmy Hull Moak, Hoppy interrupted. You know him? Everyone knows Jimmy Hull Moak. He's been in office for 30 years. Cleverest crook on the coast. On a local level, he controls everything. Perhaps we should arrange a meeting with Mr. Moak. Meetings don't work. What Moak wants is cash. Lots of it. In secret. He doesn't get caught? Asked Ringwald. He's pretty bright. Those of us who work along the coast know how he operates. I think the first step is for you to talk to Mr. Moak. I have a clean reputation, said Hoppy. For 25 years, he'd worked honestly. He wasn't going to change. We don't expect you to get dirty. Ringwald paused. We have ways of delivering what Mr. Moak wants. You won't have to touch it. In fact, you won't even know when anything happens. Hoppy liked it. Still, he felt cautious. He said he'd like to think about it. They chatted some more and said goodbye at 8. After Ringwald had left, Hoppy telephoned KLX. He spoke to Mr. Ringwald's assistant, Madeline, who explained that Mr. Ringwald was out of the office. So KLX really did exist. At 7:40 Thursday night, Lonnie Shaver had a message that George Teaker had called. He rang back, and for the first 10 minutes answered nothing except questions about the trial. Lonnie confessed that it had been a bad day for the defense, as Lawrence Krigler had made a big impression on all the jurors. All except Lonnie, of course. Teaker said that the folks in New York were worried. They were relieved that Lonnie was on the jury and was reliable. He said that they needed to arrange the final details of Lonnie's new contract. He currently earned $40,000. Superhouse would give him $50,000, with some share options and an extra annual payment which might be $20,000. An hour later, Lonnie stood at his window and told himself that he'd soon be earning $70,000 a year. Not bad for a kid whose father drove a milk truck. On Thursday night, Hoppy Dupree slept little. The agreement with Jimmy Hull Moak worried him. He'd never before been involved with anything dishonest. He sat on his porch and thought. But just before dawn on Friday morning, he started to feel better. Surely Moak would know how not to get caught. Hoppy wouldn't get near the cash. He decided that he'd have a chat with Moak and then report to Ringwald. On Friday morning, the Wall Street Journal printed an article about Krigler which said that he hadn't been a satisfactory employee and that there were mistakes in his research. The company denied that tobacco was addictive. The newspaper also said that Pinex shares had risen, then fallen. Judge Harkin read the story. He checked with Lou Dell that the jurors couldn't have seen it. In court, the defense tried to look relaxed for the day after Krigler. It was important that they didn't seem bothered. They wore light-colored suits and smiled at the jurors.
"Why are they so happy?"
whispered one of the jurors.
"They want us to think everything is under control,"
whispered back Nicholas. Wendell Rohr called the next witness, Dr. Roger Bunch. He'd become famous 10 years earlier, when he'd worked for the government and had been fiercely critical of the tobacco industry. Since leaving office, he'd continued to criticize smoking. He wanted to share his views with the jury. Cigarettes cause lung cancer, and cigarettes are addictive. Tobacco companies spend billions deceiving the public. They spend money on studies which claim that smoking is harmless. Bunch's study showed that cigarettes contain poisonous chemicals and trash swept off the floor. He had the jury's attention. Hoppy arranged to meet Jimmy Hull Moak at his office. He'd provided sandwiches and iced tea, but he was too nervous to eat anything himself. He showed Moak the drawing of the Stillwater Bay development and presented the project. "Who's doing this?" Moak asked. Hoppy had practiced his answer. He couldn't give a name. Not at this point. Moak frowned. "There could be problems with zoning and planning, but as you know, the supervisors make the final decisions."
"My client is anxious to work with you."
"You know I control everything in my district. If I want this approved, it will be. If I don't like it, it's dead." Hoppy nodded. Moak said, "You know, my son is a very fine consultant for projects like this."
"I didn't know that. My client would love to work with your son."